Chalo, Shruti ma'am, you start off.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. I think since it's not possible for the host to mute their phones, I would request everyone to put their laptops or phones on mute so that there is less disturbance during the.
Yes, ma'am, you can start.
Okay. Thank you, Vikasji. It has been a pleasure to be a part of this. And I thank the entire team and the audience who are here today to listen to this significant and a pertinent issue regarding the impact of COVID on the fundamental rights and fundamental duties. The part pertaining to fundamental rights will be spoken about by me, and Professor Gupta will be taking on the fundamental duties after I finish. So, beginning with this, I would like to start with a caveat because it's always safer to do that. These are unprecedented times, and we have no protocol whatsoever to follow because we have had no prior incidents of such a nature, not only India, but the entire world. The government is doing whatever it can in the sense that whatever is the best possible option for the government in today's scenario, that is a lockdown, has been imposed by the government because there is no preventive vaccine and there is no cure to this. There's a lot of disturbance. I would request.
Ma'am, in fact, I am trying today that that is not being popped up. How to control all the mics?
Can you please put your selves on mute?
विकास जी लियो मैं करदा तुसी होस्टिंग दी परमिशन दियो मैं कर देना 2 मिनट
मैं तो तुसी नहीं लभ रहे
ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਭਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੈਂਟਸ ਜਾਓ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੱਭ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੈਂਟਸ नीचे पार्टिसिपेंट्स ऊपर मेरा नाम आएगा ना उसे मोर क्लिक कर लेना
तो एक कोई पार्टिसिपेंट मॉडरेटर लाउड है यू जस्ट टेल मी हाउ टू स्विच ऑफ द माइक्स
नो नो नीचे देखो म्यूट ऑल लिखा है ना पार्टिसिपेंट पे बिल्कुल एंड पे जाके म्यूट ऑल नीचे नीचे जाओ ना पार्टिसिपेंट ज्यादा हो गए बहुत एंड पे है म्यूट ऑल कर दो
चलो मैम यू स्टार्ट ऑफ लास्ट माइक्स बंद
नहीं पर मैं अंजू दा माइक ऑन है डॉक्टर साहब दा माइक ऑन है काफी दा ऑन है
the participants, can you please mute yourself because there's a lot of disturbance coming from the background.
Shruti, I had muted myself. I am going to unmute. I'm just telling you.
On your photo, there is the option unmute or mute. Press mute. Everybody should press mute.
Everyone, please press mute. Thank you. Okay, carrying on with this. I was talking about an unprecedented happening, which is the outbreak of the coronavirus, and the government has imposed the lockdown under the National Disaster Management Act of 2005. The states have followed suit under the Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897, which is an old colonial law which was enacted briefly and hastily to deal with the bubonic plague in Bombay. However, and they have also taken recourse to section 144 CRPC to impose the measures required for imposing the lockdown. Now, in a democracy like India, like any other democracy, we work by a system of checks and balances, where the three organs impose checks and balances on each other. At this point of time, when I say and talk about the government, it is the executive that I'm talking about. The parliament is not in session. The judiciary is working with hardly any force, so it is not as effective. It is the executive which is doing.
Shruti ma'am, 1 second रुकना बस मैं म्यूट करता सारा ना. Just 1 second.
हाँ बेटा, मैं मानूंगा।
Now you continue.
Yes, thank you so much. That's a big relief because there's too much disturbance and it causes. Anyway,
विकास
so
में भी कर दूंगा बस.
given the fact that we work under a system of checks and balances, and the epidemic, the lockdown for this epidemic has been imposed as an executive action under two laws, the National Disaster Management Act and the Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897, both laws being insufficient and giving extremely wide powers to the executive to carry out any kind of regulations, orders that it is performing. Now, even during an emergency which is imposed under the constitution, be it national, state or financial, there is accountability to the parliament, which means that the parliamentary oversight helps keep a check on the exercise of executive power. Now in this lockdown, the parliamentary oversight is missing, which means therefore that the executive is not accountable through any medium of the parliament, of the legislature. The Ministry of Home Affairs is issuing all the orders and regulations, which seems, we don't know if there is an entire cabinet approval also over there. This leaves us with one organ, that is the judiciary. Now, the judiciary is the only organ which can keep a check on the exercise of powers during this time on the executive. I am just beginning with this, and then I will come to the impact of on the fundamental rights, because we need to understand that accountability is always to be there because without it, in cases of absolute power, we will not be able to function in the right manner. The judiciary, however, has again taken a soft approach. One, it is working underpowered, understaffed, and it seems to be leaving everything to the government and not questioning its actions at all, as seen from the various orders and judgments which are coming away on this aspect of the epidemic. The second limitation on the exercise of power comes from the fundamental rights. The fundamental rights provided under the Constitution imposes a limitation on the exercise of the executive power of the government. And here it is that I deal with two basic and fundamental rights, Article 14 and Article 21, which are under contention during this time. The regulation which has imposed, or the order which has imposed the lockdown, is neutrally worded, which means that it is not discriminating between anyone. It is applicable to one and all, and therefore it is not unequal in that sense. However, its impact is disproportionate, it is unequal. And for a long period of time, we have seen that in India and internationally, both, it is not the law which should be directly unequal in nature, but it is the impact that we have to account, because impact results in inequality. That is a violation of our rule of equality under Article 14. The impact on the ground level of this lockdown is disproportionate and unequal. I will come to that. Article 21 talks about right to life, which is the most basic and fundamental of all rights. The Supreme Court has time and again held that Article 21, right to life, is not a mere animal existence, but it means and includes so many other rights, including the right to live with dignity and the right to earn your livelihood. These are both under challenge today because of the lockdown. I'm going to take two examples. First is the difference between the people who have the capacity, the ability, and are willing to work from home. Now, these people who are willing to work from home are those who are the socially and economically advantaged class of people. Their status allows them, their capability and their wherewithal allows them to continue to earn their livelihood through the means of working from home. As opposed to this, if you look at the have-nots, which are the disadvantaged people in the society, people who are the daily wage workers, the migrant workers that we have recently seen, a huge exodus from the cities of the migrant labor population, because the lockdown which has been imposed has impacted their right to earn a living. A person who is living from paycheck to paycheck, or rather in India, who is talking about, who is earning his wages on a daily wages, and that is his means of survival, 40 days, 21 plus 19, this is the first go of the lockdown that we are aware of, without any means of earning a living, is burdening them, is impacting them even more. So this is the result of the lockdown, which is creating further inequality in the society. Now, therefore, what I'm trying to say is that the right to livelihood has been impacted, and the curfew has disproportionately affected the most vulnerable section of the society. It is leaving an unequal and a disproportionate burden on a class of people, which creates a constitutional problem of denial of their fundamental rights and basic rights, which need to be addressed by the state. The impact on the daily wage workers and their distress, including the migrant labor, especially, has been reported time and again throughout the country. Of course, you have states like Punjab, Delhi, and Uttar Pradesh who have acknowledged the need for unemployment wages. Even in Britain, if you take that example, the government there has guaranteed that 80% of the wages will be paid to all people all employees during this time. However, that does leave out the self-employed population. But we are not talking about that. We're just talking about what are the practices which can be adopted by the government at this time to mitigate the impact of the violation of their fundamental rights because of this lockdown. So it is an obligation of the state to mitigate the impact of the lockdown on these fundamental rights of the disadvantaged and the vulnerable population. The government is doing its bit, where it's providing for shelters, it is giving out food, but it remains insufficient, as we see from the various reports that we have been receiving throughout this lockdown. Here I would like to point out that even if the government may claim that it does not have sufficient money, well, it will have to think of something, because one example I can say is that the state governments do have thousands of crores lying with them in the form of worker welfare cess, which can be used. And so many people today have come forward and contributed to this lockdown and measures which can be taken to mitigate the losses of this lockdown. The second impact has been felt by those people who are living in rented accommodation, because the loss of livelihood has impacted the ability to pay rent of these people. Many countries, if you look in Europe, have ordered a temporary freeze on demolitions and evictions carried out, so that people who have not been able to earn their wages and they have no other source of income should not be evicted because they haven't paid up their rents. The Kerala and the Allahabad High Court, two high courts had passed interim orders with this respect. This was challenged in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court stayed this order on account of the assurance given by the government that they would draft a comprehensive scheme to look into this matter, which has not been done till date. So again, there is, if you look at Article 15, there are certain restrictions imposed. Discrimination is prohibited on certain grounds. This ground is on the basis of class, which may not be covered by 15, but it is a generally covered under Article 14 as a class which must be distinguished, the have-nots and the haves. Another category of people which has been impacted by this lockdown and their rights have been are being violated are women. who are in abusive relationships or are a subject of domestic violence. Now, it is every person's right to physical safety and security. This is something we did not plan for. So it is now that it has happened, it is the government's job to place immediate institutional mechanisms to respond swiftly to these problems. There are many countries who are doing this because this is not a problem which is only peculiar to India, it is happening all over the world. So these are the primary rights that I was speaking about, which have been impacted. And now the other fundamental rights, which also come into the picture, are of the few of the other rights are right to health, the right to food, the right to privacy, and the right to education. If you look at the right to food, yes, the government is trying to provide food to the labor or the poor people who do not have access. But there are so many difficulties that we are facing. We have at the moment 3 times the buffer stock required in India lying in our granaries. The Rabi crop is ready to be harvested. So the granaries must release the food to make a space for the new crop to come in. The government, however, does not have an adequate functional public distribution system because of lack of Aadhaar cards. Aadhaar cards was a proposal given recently by Rahul Gandhi to use it to distribute the food grain like this. So the PDS, the public distribution system, suffers from strong implementational failure. And it is because of this that the food grains are not reaching. Yes, the government had announced that they would give a few kilos of food grain, but that is not sufficient and it is not reaching the people because of the lack of a strong implementation of the public distribution system. Coming to right to health, the right to health of our health workers who do not have PPEs, the personal protective equipment that they are required to deal with the coronavirus patients. Again, the government is trying to ramp up this kind of dispersal of PPEs, but it is insufficient. Now, here I would like to point out a judgment of the Supreme Court of 1995, the Consumer Education and Research Center versus Union of India, which held right to health as a fundamental right of the people, the right to health of workers working in hazardous industries. And during this time, the health workers fall into this category, and we need to take care of their health and guarantee the right to health to these healthcare professionals who are our frontline soldiers during this time. Right to privacy, guaranteed in 2017, interpreted to be a part of Article 21 under the Puttaswamy judgment, is again being violated. We saw that as soon as the epidemic was declared and people were coming up with cases, the government published publicly the names and addresses of people who were in isolation and were coronavirus patients. The government app of Arogya Setu, which they have come up with recently, with a laudable objective, however, is violating our right to privacy during this time. So I am just raising questions at this moment regarding the impact on fundamental rights, not that the government is not supposed to do it, but they should be able to mitigate and remember that they are accountable for these violations of these rights. Lastly, I would like to talk about right to education. Of course, this is not a primary right which is being affected, but nevertheless, it is a right which is being affected. Education today is being provided online through the online medium. Students of families who can afford this kind of a medium would be open to classes through the online medium. However, the right to education, which was added to the Constitution under Article 21A, remains a distant future now because the government schools cannot during this period provide education to the poor people who were being given education free of cost. And it is also affecting the midday meal policy. because those people are again not being provided the midday meals. These are a few of the rights which I wanted to highlight, which have been impacted during the lockdown imposed by the government. Not that the government has any other measure. This is something which is the only option with the government during this time, because there is no cure and there is no vaccine. But we cannot forget that we have to question the government on its policy, because today there is no parliament left to control it, question it, not left, but is not there. There is no parliamentary oversight at the moment. The judiciary is also not being as active as it should be. It is often said, it is a Latin maxim of Cicero, who said that laws fall silent during times of war. But I would like to change it a bit and say that laws should not fall silent even during times of war, because if we voluntarily give up our hard-won rights, it is something that we need to think of, that what will happen to these rights once this time is over. So let us not reach a situation where the cure, that is the lockdown, is worse than the malady, the disease. Thank you so much.
थोड़ा
I
जा
would
लास्ट वाला
now
पार्ट बोलना
like
पड़ेगा
to
दोबारा
hand over the talk to Professor Gupta, who can continue about the fundamental.
Uh, Shruti ma'am, could you repeat the last two lines, because somehow your set got hanged
But
up.
I was just saying that we cannot, yes, cannot afford to give up so easily on our fundamental rights during this time. No doubt it's an unprecedented time, and public is ready to give up its right to ensure its health in the long term. However, we cannot forget that rights once lost will be harder to win back. And I just ended with something from Cicero, that in times of war, when he says that laws should fall silent, I don't agree with that, because our cure cannot become worse than the disease or the malady itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shruti. A good deep viewpoint regarding what the government has been able to do within the parameters of the fundamental rights, and what needs to be done to mitigate the suffering which is still continuing due to the lockdown, which has been continuing for a good long time. So far as about the duties is concerned, this aspect is equally important. My romance with the Constitution started in the year 1964. Constitution was in teens, only 14 years old. I was 20. The fundamental right duties came to be incorporated in the Constitution during the internal emergency through the medium of 42nd Amendment of the Constitution in the year 1976. During that particular period, particularly the fundamental right under Article 21 stood suspended. Therefore, the need which was felt for the introduction of the fundamental duties was due to that particular internal emergency that the country was facing as such. Once again, it's kind of an emergency situation that we are faced with. And therefore, these fundamental duties become very significant. The major issue which concerns is that these duties are not justiciable, are not enforceable under the Constitution. I'm conscious of this particular fact that this aspect, that the rights which are given in the Constitution, can those rights be meaningful in the absence of the duties which are to be carried out? And therefore, the basic issue that we are concerned today has been responded to on the 6th of April by Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Justice Bobde, when he, in a particular order, observed that these duties are not optional. These duties are to be carried out. For instance, social distancing is not a discretion. It's a duty which every citizen owes in order to ensure that the entire system works effectively as such. And therefore, due emphasis has been given by the Indian judiciary in regard to the duties which are to be carried out during this particular trying situation and circumstances which are going on. Not only that, probably thinking that this kind of a situation can arise on the 22nd of February in an international conference for judicial reforms, Chief Justice Bobde observed that the rights become real only when the duties are performed. And therefore, this particular relationship of fundamental rights and fundamental duties, they are possible to be correlated, to be carried out only and only if, even jurisprudentially, we consider this aspect that duties are integral to rights. You can't segregate the two. If I wish to have my rights, equally I have to respect the duty, through the duty process, the rights of the others as well. This is the real challenge which we are going to face in this particular situation. Even under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the rights which are guaranteed are to be balanced. If I have a right, equally others also have the rights. And unless I respect the rights of the others, I have no legitimate right to expect my rights to be honored in that particular process. This balancing is very important. Otherwise, the rights would lose their meaning totally and completely. This would not be something which would be desirable or expected to be carried out in that particular process as such. Professor Shruti talked about the right to health as such. Certainly, but every citizen of the country owes a duty. The duty with regard to social distancing. If the other person's right is there, certainly I owe certain obligations in that particular process. And therefore, this responsibility is to be carried out by every citizen of the country. It would not be possible otherwise to effectively carry it out. Article 51A, which came to be introduced and became effective on the 3rd of January 1977, when we were still under the internal emergency, speaks of certain duties to be carried out by every citizen of the country. Now, those particular duties, not talking about every duty as such, in the present context, certain duties have assumed significance, importance for that matter. First of all, the duty which is stipulated under Article 51E, subclause E, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood across all religions, languages, caste, regional diversities as such. Now, this is the most challenging time when this particular aspect of promoting harmony and common brotherhood is concerned. To say this, that this particular duty is not enforceable, is certainly of no significance in this present situation. Recently, on the 15th of April, a matter came up before the Bombay High Court regarding the migrant laborers as such, with regard to their conditions, with regard to the kind of facilities which were being provided to them. That particular issue was considered at length by the Bombay High Court. And it was acknowledged, recorded by the Bombay High Court, that the government also has its own limitations to deal with such problems as such. And in spite of that, that more effort needs to be put in. In that particular context, the Bombay High Court has recorded that the duty today is to maintain peace, harmony, and the spirit of brotherhood during COVID-19 as such. This is a reminder which needs to be followed. I would like to specifically share with you as to what the Bombay High Court has said in this regard. This court expects effective measures from the respondent state. It also expects that citizens would remind themselves of fundamental duties and would discharge them to deal with the outbreak of COVID-19. Now, this is the kind of a challenge that we are faced with. Even if the duties are not enforceable, before both the Supreme Court and the High Courts has acknowledged this fact that this is a duty which the citizens owe. This is a duty which the citizens have to respect and carry it out. In fact, this is a duty which protects the self, protects others also. So in such a situation, in such difficult times, to maintain harmony, brotherhood, it's so vital. Are we going to talk that this duty is not enforceable? Certainly, it has been now. In fact, the Supreme Court was dealing with this particular matter and took up this matter regarding the duties under Article 142 of the Constitution as such. That was the need of the hour to be carried out, and I'm happy that they did so in this particular context. I would also here specifically to deal with another duty which is significant, to develop scientific temper, humanism, and abjure violence, save property from destruction as such. This particular COVID-19 has affected 208 countries around the globe. What has happened in India has happened nowhere else as such. The doctors the nurses, other health staff, how they are being treated by the people, what kind of problems they are facing. They have to run for their life. They are being bitten. And this kind of a situation, particularly when there is a constitutional duty to abjure violence, I am conscious of the fact that the criminal law would take its own recourse. But this is the time where we have to remind ourselves of the duty incorporated in the Constitution itself to ensure that we behave in a particular manner, conduct ourselves in a particular manner. They are the frontline warriors. They are putting everything at stake. And yet we are treating them in this particular manner. This is the real challenge. This is the real need of the hour, that we need to realize that such thing should not happen, should not be repeated. Not only that, look at the incident which took place in Patiala. The hand of the police officer was chopped off. Such kind of violence, is it thinkable in such kind of a situation as such? And that too, one could not understand as to what could be the possible motivation against that. Why did this happen? Patiala incident is not the only incident. Such violence is taking place in certain other places also. And therefore the question that we need to confront ourselves in this regard is definitely to see and ensure that such kind of incidents do not happen and do not be carried out. May it be Patiala, may it be the Tonk city in Rajasthan or in Lucknow. This is the biggest challenge that we are faced with. And we need to really effectively take care of this particular situation. Our frontline warriors, may it be the doctors, may it be the police, may it be the other security staff, we need to really take care of that situation. And not to say that since they're not justiciable, this can go on and continue to happen as such. This certainly is not the aspect which should be allowed to happen in this kind of a situation. I go a step further. There is another fundamental duty to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women. Professor Shruti has raised this particular issue. Domestic violence during this lockdown period has manifold increased as such. And therefore, in this kind of a situation, this particular fundamental duty which is incorporated to renounce practices which are derogatory to the dignity of women is most significant. Domestic violence, this issue, suo motu, has been taken notice of by the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. In fact, only this morning in the newspaper, this particular case has been recorded. I'm so very happy that the High Court of J&K has taken very meaningful steps in this particular direction. Institutional mechanism, which Professor Shruti talked about, has been taken care by Honorable the Chief Justice, Geeta Mittal, in this particular context. In fact, the National Women Commission has raised this issue that the number of complaints which have come up are too large during this particular lockdown period. It's not understandable. It's not at all something which can be digested as such. Consequently, what needs to be done, what needs to be looked into, that in these most trying times, each citizen must realize one's own responsibility as such. And consequently, in that particular context, we have to play our own role in a positive manner. I'm absolutely conscious of the fact that this is a trying time, a challenging time. So much of negativity with regard to the kind of a situation which is prevailing, and therefore happiness to kill negativity with happy minds, to take and deal with the situations in an effective manner is very important. The mental health in such situations, circumstances, we owe it to ourselves. It's a responsibility. It's a social responsibility which we need to discharge effectively in that particular context. It's a challenge of the time, and we need to really look forward as to how best we can carry it out. I wish all the best.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, ma'am. Since a few people have joined today for the first time, invariably we had a different model that we had 40 minutes session, then we had a break, and thereafter we had a recap, then question and answer session. But since we are running short of time, we have changed the model, just like as we do in the cricket. We have reduced the overs, but we will play like a duck-lewis system. And wonderfully well, I would like to say that from 50 overs, we have drafted into 20 overs. Both Shruti and Balram Gupta, sir, both have been professors, and they say that professors their mind clock cannot stop less than 40 minutes. They have to speak at 40 minutes and then only they can stop. But yet they have drafted themselves to speak for 20 minutes. It's just like a player of 50 overs match being drafted, and then he comes in and plays for the 20 overs. Now we are going for the question and answer sessions. Both of you can choose who will answer them. I will read one and one answer from the chat which have been posted. It's your take that anybody can answer it. So first question would be, Mr. Wirk has asked, when the impact of the lockdown is different on different strata of society, whether it is not violative of Article 14 of the Constitution of India.
Let Shruti answer this.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Virk. In fact, I started my talk from precisely this point, that equality violation is not about a law which is arbitrary in itself, but what has to be examined is the impact of the law. So the measure of the lockdown imposed by the government is maybe neutrally worded, but the impact is disproportionate, it is unequal on all people. And it is the difference between the classes in our society, which is the advantaged position, who are working from home, who are well off, as opposed to the poor people, the daily wage workers and the migrant labor who we have seen are suffering, that the where the situation becomes even more pronounced and highlighted, that the impact is having a disproportionate, is impacting them in a disproportionate manner, where the vulnerable section of the society, which is already poor, which is already suffering, is having to bear the loss of and burden of this lockdown in a harsher manner.
Next question, Vikasji.
Next question is, if the protection, it is by Rajiv Joshi, if the protection of fundamental rights cannot be ensured without prejudicing or putting at a grave risk the execution of the executive's action against the pandemic, can the state take up the, it should be defense, I suppose, or defiance of reasonable restriction upon the fundamental rights permitted under the scheme of the Constitution?
As far as the, again, since it's rights, I'm going to answer that. I did not particularly touch the fundamental rights under Article 19, which is the freedom of movement, again impacted during this pandemic, and the freedom of assembly. Because under Article 19.3 and the other subsequent clauses of Article 19, you have reasonable restrictions which are imposed on the ground of public interest. And this pandemic being a public health crisis, we have voluntarily agreed to give up this or have our movement and the right of assembly be restricted. So I am not talking about those rights. The point that I'm trying to make here is the impact on the basic and the more fundamental rights, the minimum rights which have to be guaranteed by the state during any situation, even during emergency. Article 21 now today does not stand suspended after the amendment in 1978. So how do you justify that the government not take care of the right to life of the people during this time?
Vikas, I would like to add here, you know,
sir, I am one of the participants like any other person.
Right.
If I had so much knowledge, I would have been the speaker. I would have been playing on the other side.
Now, let me just add to what Professor Shruti has said. You know, fundamental rights and the fundamental duties need to be read as limitations on the fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are not absolute. And therefore, in that particular process, this harmonization of the duties into the fundamental rights has to be balanced as such. This is overdue. Already the Supreme Court and some high courts moving forward in this particular direction. I'm sure under Article 142, in order to do complete justice, these duties would be definitely read into fundamental rights.
So the next question, what I could gather is two people have asked a common question, that is Jinender and Sahil, as to why they have allowed that the UP government had allowed the students to be evacuated from Kota, but not the migrant laborers. Is it a violation of Article 14? Probably both have read the article of Senior Advocate Rakesh Dwivedi, which was posted yesterday on the Live Law. Probably they are taking cue from that.
Yes, absolutely. I think a petition has also been filed for this purpose, for regarding the migrant labor. And absolutely, if we can see also the difference is also that from what I presume is the difference in the number of the migrant labor and the student population. And it is the states which are taking independent initiatives with respect to this. So it depends again on the resources and the initiative taken by the state as to if they are willing to get back the migrant labor, especially those who are testing, like the article was saying that those labor who test negative to the coronavirus test, they should be allowed to at least get back to their own states.
Sahil Gambhir asks, advocates have not been included in the essential services, as per my knowledge, whereas the district courts, though sitting, are not working via video conferencing. So aren't our rights being infringed as we aren't being provided the moment pass.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think if this is now carrying on for quite a while, and we need to have a relook at the situation where we can adopt different ways of taking up cases. The courts also cannot carry on like this functioning. We will have to think out of the box measures which can be adopted to tackle the cases pending. So, right to speedy trial, of course, at this time is which is again a fundamental right now, is nowhere near the horizon. We are not even talking about it, and this is what is impacted most with the courts not functioning.
Taking cue from that, one of the issues with, because once we are talking across the platform, what issue is bothering and going across the lawyers also, since major platform is of the lawyers on the today's meeting, is that let's assume they start also, then how they will allow that the petition is signed by somebody. Some courts are saying that you file the petition and it is your duty to ensure that you subsequently file the petition which bears the signatures. Now a client talks to you and says that you go ahead with the petition, he can say with the email. I suppose that one of the situation could be through a virtual platform, that is through WhatsApp, etc., wherein the consent comes that yes, he is actually late. But again, we are talking of a class who is literate and who understands the nitty-gritty. Dispensing of the affidavit, right now it can be dispensed in the manner same as if there's a self-attestation in large number of cases. So I think everybody has to sit across all these platforms like today, what we are talking. Some modalities will come out across in this. I'll read the
You
question.
require some brainstorming, and you need to come up with new ideas to tackle this, because this is the new situation and we have to move along with the times. We cannot give up entirely. We have to change our whole system.
See, this aspect needs a deep consideration, and off-the-cuff solutions cannot be found. And consequently, in that particular context, what needs to be done is we have to pool our minds together, as has been suggested, and come out with, I'm sure, this particular kind of system for all times to come as such, or in the near future as such, would not be practically possible. And therefore, how to evolve a system effective enough and go along with that system over a period of time certainly needs to be worked out.
So Sahaj Punj asks, the excessive powers given by the state to the respective state police and the brutality carried by the police is creating a sense of frightening environment rather than a feeling of brotherhood. And also the media channels are showing these images of police brutality, nationality, and are celebrating these grave unlawful actions called by the state police. Sir, are these actions taken by the state police and the media houses doing a good thing at the time of the this pandemic?
See, there is a responsibility on the part of every citizen in this particular context. When lockdown has been enforced, should they be coming out? Should they be violating the curfew as such? And in that particular process, how to deal with that particular situation? A balancing needs to be done in that particular context. In fact, I was so very happy yesterday to see a request was made on telephone by a parent of a child whose first birthday was to be celebrated. A telephone call to a police officer, and within hours, a cake was taken by the police officer to the residence of that particular child to celebrate the birthday as such. Or I was reading the other story, a child was delivered by the mother in the police van when she was being taken by the police to the hospital as such. It's a most trying circumstance and situation. The role which the police is playing is a role which is a challenging role, and therefore the citizenry needs to cooperate. The solidarity of the citizenry is equally important.
Mr. Sachdeva asks, I reiterate this issue of balancing the state police powers being excessively used brutality to effect the lockdown, thus compromising the fundamental rights and media to have a sadistic pleasure in broadcasting, totally ignoring the basic needs of the persons in so many manners.
See, these brutalities, I don't think so that unless a particular situation, and that too with the restraint that they exercise, some kind of, that was also with absolute restraint. And therefore, we need to realize the situation, the circumstances through which we are going as such, and not really put across that police is not conducting itself in the manner as it ought to.
I would like to add something here. When we talk of accountability, and in fact, this was something that I raised right at the beginning of my talk, that the executive action at this moment suffers from lack of accountability. There is no check, no balance on the action of the executive at this moment. Like I gave you the example that even during emergency, imposition of emergency, it requires parliamentary approval, which under the lockdown, the measure of the lockdown imposed by the government under the two acts, which are extremely widely worded and give large powers to the executive to do whatever they want. There is no check of the parliamentary oversight left in today's time. It is a situation much worse than an emergency being imposed under the constitution. The only other organ which is left is the judiciary. So we need to perk up our mechanism so that the judiciary realizes that it is the only organ left to hold the executive action accountable and to question, to debate, and to discuss what the executive is doing during this time. And we cannot afford to take a back seat and relax and think that it is a policy matter. Let it be left to the government to take whatever stand they want to do, and what we must ignore, and we must follow and support the government in what they're doing. However laudatory the measure of the government may be, it does need to be accountable, especially in a democracy.
Ma'am, Sahaj Punj wants to post, no, Sumit Kansal wants to post a question directly. Sapan, could you unmute? Hello, Sapan? Sapan?
Please name again.
Just hold on. Sumit Kansal.
Just hold on. I'll do it. Now Sumit can do it. Sumit?
Yeah, just a moment. Yeah. So my question is to Shruti ma'am. Ma'am, according to you, what would be the best solution this kind of a scenario which the state can take for small shopkeepers, MSME units, because these clients, rather than talking about these legal things, more concerned about business operations, wherein like stock is piling up, they are unable to sell it. Landlord is saying I have to pay income tax, GST, house tax. Tenant is not paying me because tenant is not having his operations. Employers advisory from Ministry of Labor that employee salaries should be paid, but how will the employer pay? Because all is at a standstill. Tourism industry, restaurant industry, highly impacted. What should be the solution? Is it only financial, wherein government not supporting?
These are cross questions, because both sets of rights are being violated. Like you're saying, the landlord, yes, the old landlord who is not able to earn any kind of income from any other place except the rent that he's getting from the tenant, is impacted. The employer whose business is shut down, whose factory industry is shut down, is again at the end of his tether, because if he is asked by the state to impose the state is shifted its burden in fact on the employer by asking it to pay wages. How can you ask an employer who himself is not earning to pay wages to the employees? You are in a welfare state where the government is supposed to take care of that responsibility. Can it shift this burden to the employer? I do not think so. So what I think the government, see, as a constitutional academician, it is not within my domain to give an answer to this question that what should the government do. But somehow it will have to come up with a policy and it cannot say that it cannot cite an excuse of lack of finances, for the reason that it is the responsibility of the executive to provide and look after the minimum core rights of the people. So maybe they evolve something like a universal income scheme, which they will have to think of, which helps everyone in the loop. It is right now we currently only thinking of the very poor, who are not even able to eat in today's time. They are dying of hunger and starvation. That is the most important focus at the moment. But if it continues for a longer time, there will be other players in the game whose interest will have to be looked after.
Right. So what Balram
Ma'am.
sir also said, that social distancing being a duty and the fundamental right of business and livelihood being highly vitiated in such a scenario, especially because of certain miscreants in Delhi, Mumbai we see. So can we say that in the current scenario, the fundamental rights and duties are not going hand in hand and the rights are severely impacted?
The rights are impacted, definitely. Duties are of the citizens. The citizens might to a certain extent be performing their duties. We need to go ahead and do it more, but so does the government need to step up. It needs to mitigate the impact on the rights of the people. It needs to find new measures to take care of especially those people who are heavily impacted by this.
Right, thank you.
Ma'am, before taking to Satyam Tandon, I will just say that the issue regarding as to whether you can the employer can be imposed that the payment of salaries such had to be made. That I was just checking it out in the live law and the bar and bench. Probably last week it was stated that a writ petition already stands filed to that effect. So one of the issue would be that it is the matter is sub judice and the Supreme Court would be taking cue. Satyam Tandon has posted something regarding Article 51. I would say because I couldn't from that entire message, it couldn't gather whether he's informing us or there is a question. Satyam can explain if he's on the board. Satyam Tandon. Prateek Gupta asks, how viable and sustainable would be the imposition of financial emergency under Article 360?
For a financial emergency to be imposed, we need to be in a situation of a financial crisis. I don't think India is in that situation, so we cannot therefore rightly invoke Article 360 at the moment. If we reach a situation where the government is in a financial crisis, it will resort to that effect. But because this is a pandemic, a new thing, I think today's Indian Express carried Chidambaram's article regarding how the public expenditure government has, I don't remember the exact figure, but thousands of crores lying, and it should be easily able to disperse 65,000 crores from that expenditure ahead to the people for tackling this pandemic, which should be useful and helpful. And why is it not doing that remains to be seen.
Satyam has clarified that it was his general comment. Thank you, Satyam, for responding. Ma'am, Charanpal Singh Bagri says, right to be cremated in a dignified manner has been violated, as we are getting the news from the various parts of the state of Punjab and the country itself, that people are not allowing to cremate a person died due to COVID-19. So in that situation, the administration had to create such persons either at the odd hours or on some land outside the land of the village.
Yeah, you're right. These are issues which are again coming up. Right to life includes the right to dignity even after death. So that is an interpretation of the Supreme Court being given. And I think that is something, but that again...
Ma'am, your voice is echoed.
Yeah, I don't know why. Is it fine now?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, what is happening is that these are rights, of course, but I think the more important rights that we are presently first and foremost need to think about are the impact on the really poor people who are not able to earn their living because of no means to earn a living during this 40-day period of a lockdown.
Loveleen asks, everyone talks about the impact of the lockdown on the have-nots and the impact on the salaried. The impact of the lockdown on self-employed also has to be examined, because if the needs and rights of this sector are not addressed, it will eventually lead to a complete collapse of the economy. What is the responsibility of the judiciary, legislature at this time with regard to the lack of planning and preparation of the government in imposing the lockdown and not completely assessing the impact of the lockdown or different sectors?
Absolutely. The self-employed, when we talk of the wages being, unemployment wages being given, we leave out the self-employed. And that is one category we cannot afford to leave out. Therefore, the government somehow has to, that what I was answering to Mr. Sumit Kansal, that it will have to come up with some kind of a universal income scheme, which, or again, as suggested by Suhail said today, I think in the article, he's talking of Manrega, where 100 days income is being should be given to those people who are absolutely who are so poor, cannot earn anything during this time. So it is on the duty of the government to come up with some suggestions. It has the resources, it has the means, it has the power to implement it, and it has to think out of the box to make sure that this is done, and it is able to reach out to each and every person, because this is, till the time we do not get a cure, this is not going to get over so soon, or a vaccine.
Harveet Singh Sehgal is asking, we are discussing fundamental rights of tenants and employees, but how can the state force the landlord to forego rent and the employers to pay salaries? What about the landlord's earning?
I think I answered that already when we were talking.
Yes. And Mr. V.K. Sachdeva also has been kind enough. And in fact, if we read all these articles, they are all says that the landlord-tenant relationship is mutual until unless that agreement, though there's no legal interpretation, but all the articles what have come forth till now, it says it's a mutual agreement. Force majeure clause until unless incorporated in your rental agreement or the lease agreement will not allow you to say that you can ask for a deference of the rent and the lease deed, but all the articles are only towards one pinpoint, that once you have agreed upon it, you have to pay, and it can't be foregone until unless there's an agreement. And since nobody had actually visualized all this thing, therefore, as on date, the articles only pinpoint towards this thing, that it has to pay. And Anirudh Nanda wants to ask a question directly. Sapan, could you unmute him?
I have.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Anirudh.
Ma'am, my question is that we all have talked a lot about as to which events have followed after COVID-19. But isn't there a need to also talk about rights of nature? So this is one odd incident which started in China. But what we are seeing as that in near future, if we do not handle the nature, we've been doing it as of now, it's going to get worse. So isn't it the right time to push for rights of nature as well, so that we can control what's going to happen in future?
I think, Anirudh, that's a very important thing, provided that we all stay alive and come out successfully out of this pandemic, because there are people, I'm sure this pandemic has made people realize a lot of things. And one of the important things that we have realized, at least for people living in Chandigarh, is who were already enjoying the fruits of nature to a larger extent as compared to the other cities in India, is that Chandigarh can be cleaner, more beautiful, and we can have animals living their own life if we let things be. And we have interfered, man has interfered with nature to a large extent. And this is a time where people have sat back and realized that nature will go on without man. It does not need man. We need nature. And therefore, the sense of us really looking after that, our provider, which is nature, is it's more of a realization which already has seeped in and should seep in to a larger extent, that our future depends on how we look after the nature, not how it looks after us.
And one thing for the entire group, on 25th, we are having On 24th, we are having an exclusive topic itself only, frustration and force majeure, general conception, applicability, COVID-19 scenario. We will discuss the lease, tenancy, etc., everything. And Mr. Sajdeva wants to give a suggestion. So, Mr. Sapan, you can unmute Mr. VK Sajdeva.
I have done that, brother. Come, Mr. Sajdeva.
Well, Dr. Balram and Dr. Shruti, it is a wonderful, exceptionally excellent expression of views on this such an important topic, which has enlightened one and all us. I have one suggestion, Vikasji and Sapanji, to both of you, that this session, which has been articulated in such a beautiful manner, it must be given a reach to the maximum. Like
So
you can make out that this is posted on all these social media platforms, not by only you. Whoever is posted, it should be spread, because these are the views, this is the knowledge which has been expanded to all of us, and most of the people should utilize it. That's what my suggestion is.
Yes, I have posted on Facebook.
Because it will make a lot of difference in the thinking of the people across the board.
YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere I am posting it.
With a request to the others also to post it further on their platforms.
Please, please, please. Thank you,
Komal ma'am wants to talk directly to Balram Gupta ji.
Just hold on.
Directly means on the platform itself. Otherwise, they have the phone numbers, they each other otherwise.
I have unmuted her also.
Yeah, sir, I just want to ask you one question. That why are we giving communal color to this fight against COVID-19? Because whatever is happening in the country now, and that's really disgusting, because everywhere we are blaming Jamatis only. Although we had all those Hindu processions and all, but nowhere we are discussing that they were also infringing the rules. But we are just concentrating on Jamatis. And I'll just read out that even in the Director General of HP said there is communal discrimination in shops, hospitals, in the state during COVID-19. And there were reports of tenants being asked to vacate because they belong to a particular community. So how do we are going about this fundamental duty of brotherhood when we cannot maintain this communal harmony?
Komal, let me respond to this. I think the entire situation was such which required restraint. And initially certain things happened where this kind of a thing, one could say, yes, it did. But it has been so very well handled thereafter. We need to balance the entire situation. You know what is happening. You know how it is happening. And therefore, in that particular context, we have to just forget, ignore, and move forward. This brotherhood, this solidarity in this present time is most important. Even if something happened, completely just forget about it. We are marching ahead in spite of that initial aspect. And therefore, this issue needs to be handled intelligently, effectively, without generating any such kind of feeling. Harmony is most important in such a time. And therefore, the more we can subdue this aspect, each one has to play a role in this particular context. It is not only the media or anybody. Everyone has to restrain in this particular entire. This is the most significant aspect, and that's why this duty of promoting harmony and common brotherhood is vital in this given situation. It's a human issue, humane issue, and let's not really play with it.
Thank you,
so we are running short of time. Now it's 12:25. And I think all questions stands answered. If somebody wants to ask a question, that would be the last question, but I don't think there's any question left in the chat box. Before I ask Sapan to give a vote of thanks, I would just like to sum up the entire session of today. I say that it was a wonderful session being sandwiched between the father and the daughter in their thought process. Fortunately enough, I've been interacting with Mr. Gupta as well as Shruti Bedi ma'am. Unfortunately enough, I've not studied from both of them. But the students from both of them have done wonderfully. If God had been kind enough, even if in a given circumstance I could have studied from Mr. Gupta or Shruti ma'am, my knowledge of law would have been much better on the platform of what the students are today. And secondly, it's a very different occasion. In sports, you don't find father and son playing together. It's a very rare occasion. In movies, yes, we see Amitabh Bachchan, son and daughter, then Kapoor's father and son playing together. But in sports, it's very difficult. But on academic fronts, I've realized for the first time that we can all, again, we can have the father-son together. Siblings, of course, yes, in sports we see Mohindra Ramanath and Surendra Ramanath. We have seen a large number of players, Irfan Pathan and Yusuf Pathan. So thank you to both of you. It was a wonderful session. Sapan, just give a vote of thanks, and it was a wonderful feeling. Anybody who wants to know more about these sessions can like us on the Facebook page or connect us through the WhatsApp group. That is, now we have changed the name. Now we have
Beyond CLC. Beyond law CLC.
Beyond law is instead of legal I, because some person was having that, he's trying to register the name. And Sapan, over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Please, before I give vote of thanks to Dr. Gupta and Dr. Bedi, Mr. IP Singh has raised his hand. I think he has some question. So I am unmuting him for a while and then I'll come over to.
But that would be the last question.
That would be the last question. Yeah. Mr. IP Singh, I am just unmuting you. Just hold on. Or you can yourself do it.
All right.
Please.
Yes. So my suggestion is regarding the distribution system of the ration which is being done. We have seen the videos and reports. In some part, there is very shortage of the dry ration as well as food, whereas it is being accumulated by different persons. And even the reports are there from the Gurdwaras that the cooked food is being wasted. So far as the dry ration is concerned, my suggestion is to the authority, if somebody can give, can't we adopt the system of putting a stamp on the finger like as a voter? We put on the finger that mark so that the person doesn't get the same ration in the same area again.
Let me respond, Mr. Singh, in regard to this. In fact, the other day, I was watching a video where a particular person went to a particular shop, grocery shop, with so much accumulated with him that you kindly take this and give me the money for this particular aspect.
Yeah,
the shopkeeper specifically.
Sir, your voice, sir, you have to repeat it again.
Shruti ma'am, could you ask Shrish to help him out?
Shruti ma'am, she's also not there. Hello.
Singh Saab, your talk has been rationed today. We will catch up some other day.
Now I have to give vote of thanks to both of them, but they are not
fortuitously both of them are not there. You can put it across, they can see on the social platforms.
Just hold on. I think they have dropped the connection and then come back. No. Sir has gone. He will be coming back.
Sapan, you can post the mobile.
Yes, sir has come. I just hold on.
And you can post the mobile number of yours and mine because people would like to join the group.
I'll do that. Can you do yours and I'll do mine?
Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Gupta ji.
Yes.
Are you there, na?
Yes, yes.
Dr. Bedi, just I think she has dropped her connection.
No, she has sent me a text that Zoom is not responding and she cannot hear anything.
All right, I'll give her recording then. I must say Dr. Gupta and Dr. Bedi has given us so wide an experience on this issue of impact of COVID-19 on fundamental rights and duties. And I must thank to both of them that we have been enlightened so much, and we have been given answers of everybody they have given in a quite responsible and elaborated way. I must thank Madam Komal and Dr. Tiwari and Madam Shikha and everybody here to have joining with us on this issue and have enlightened their experiences as well. And one thing more I must add, I respect Mr. Sachdeva for his nice comments to post it everywhere. I will be posting, I will have his advice, his blessings. Simultaneously, I must thank Mr. Vikas Chatrat also to join us on such a good platform here with whose intervention we are enjoying so much education from the legendaries here. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Just one thing. Today again we have a session in the afternoon, though I posted in the group, and the session's name, session title is Interparental Child Removal, and that is by Anil Malhotra. He is known for them. He's a good academician plus a very famous lawyer. So the timing would be 5. We would be posting the ID plus meeting password on the WhatsApp group as well as on the Facebook. Thank you. It was a nice catching up with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So I am ending the meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.